She discovers unexpected love after hugging a stranger to escape her toxic ex, an incredible twist. Emily felt the weight of the day press heavily on her shoulders as the cold wind cut through the darkening streets. A shift of emotions twisted inside her, churning like a wild storm. Greg's words from their latest argument echoed brutally in her mind, laced with condescension and doubt. "You'll never be anything more than a nurse," he had hissed, his disdain seeping into every syllable. Each time he dismissed her dreams, it chipped away at the fragments of her self-worth, leaving her feeling hollow. She sought solace, but all she found was the suffocating grip of his expectations. After leaving the hospital where she spent endless hours bandaging bruises and soothing fears, her own heart remained bruised, trapped in this toxic cycle. Now, aimlessly wandering the quiet park, she could no longer bear the torment simmering within. The faint scent of the greenery mixed with the bitterness of her sorrow. It was in that moment, out of pure desperation, she impulsively embraced a stranger sitting alone on a bench. Jake, with tousled hair and paint-streaked hands, looked up in surprise as she wrapped her arms around him. It was electric, that brief moment of connection, pulling her from her spiraling thoughts. Before she could even comprehend the shift in her heart, warm words flowed between them at a small coffee shop, filling the silence that haunted her every step. They discussed their dreams, each exchange dissolving her burdens just a little more, but as warmth blossomed, so did the tension deep within her mind. How could she risk her newfound interest in Jake when Greg was lurking in the periphery of her life like a dark cloud, ready to unleash his wrath? Did she even deserve something beyond the predictable prison she was struggling to escape? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Each laugh they shared masked the growing dread within her as days passed and the tension mounted. Greg caught glimpses of their chemistry through the stories Emily hesitated to hide. One fateful night, bursting with jealousy, he confronted her, words erupting like fiery arrows. "I see how you look at him. Do you think I'm blind?" His voice was low, menacing, each accusation twisted her insides into knots. "You think you can decide who to be?" Anguish clung to her like a heavy cloak, suffocating her soul. With each blow, Emily felt the pull of loyalty to a love that was smothering her dreams. Horrified at betraying Greg, she also felt the thrill of possibility with Jake, the unguarded moments igniting a long-dormant fire within her. The contrast roared in her chest. Just when she wrestled with the toxicity of her choice, a glimmer of clarity emerged one night as she rummaged through her grandmother's attic. There, hidden beneath layers of dust, an old sketchbook unveiled her grandmother's vibrant paintings, breathing life into dreams long forgotten. It felt like a sign, a glimpse into her potential, stifled yet persistent. But as the dim glow of hope illuminated her intentions, shadows of doubt whispered insidiously. Would she dare to choose the path of passion over guilt? As the paintbrushes lay before her, untouched and trembling, she positioned herself at the precipice of transformation. Greg's threats loomed larger each day, entwined with her family's expectations, keeping her tethered to the place she was desperate to flee. Existence became a careful balance of fear and yearning. The drive to reclaim herself clashed violently with the chains of a past that may refuse to release her. She stood, heart racing, on the cusp of a decision that could obliterate everything she knew, caught in a tempest of ambition, despair, and the need for love. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow across Emily's cluttered dining table, where the sketchbook lay open. She reached for the delicate paintbrushes, each one feeling foreign in her grip yet undeniably inviting. The colors within the pages pulsated with life and creativity, whispering promises of uncharted possibilities. For the first time, she felt the tang of inspiration, but it clashed painfully with the nagging voice of doubt that had become far too familiar. "Will you step into your true self or retreat into the shadows?" The words echoed in her mind as she dipped the brush into a hue that reflected her inner fire. Taking a deep breath, she hesitated, knowing that every stroke would draw her further away from the suffocating grip of her past and the fears that accompanied it. Part of her yearned to unleash her artistic spirit, but the haunting specter of Greg lingered like a heavy fog, threatening and relentless. As she began to paint, however, something within her ignited. Each line and swirl unleashed a torrent of emotion, transforming her confusion and pain into something tangible. She painted the sprawling trees of the park where she'd first hugged Jake, capturing the essence of clarity amid chaos. It felt liberating, but with every swipe of the brush, she felt a stab of fear. What if Greg found out? The thought curled around her heart, squeezing tight. Torn between creating and being created, each moment stretched into a battle. Should she hold on to her art, or would it only further distance her from Greg's grip? A shiver raced down her spine, a frigid reminder of his power, but she pushed it aside, layering strokes that embodied her own truth. That evening, after hours lost in art, Emily faced the mirror, smudges of paint on her cheeks like war paint. Who was this woman staring back at her? A flicker of defiance danced in her eyes, sparking something within that seemed dormant for far too long. She had loved what she had created, but an unsettling fear lingered, warning her that stepping forward came at a cost. The passion she was reclaiming felt volatile, like a storm brewing on the horizon. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, jolting her out of her reverie. Anxiety twisted in her stomach as she approached the door, unsure who awaited her. Peering cautiously through the peephole, her heart raced when she spotted Jake standing there, an easy smile painting his lips. "Hey, I thought I'd stop by and see how you were," he said with genuine warmth, and for a second, the storm outside her door faded. It was comforting to engage with someone who seemed to truly see her, beyond the coarse armor she had built. Yet, guilt twisted her insides. Greg lurked just outside the edge of her thoughts, a dark haze threatening to swallow this new brightness. "Hi." She finally responds, forcing a smile as she opened the door. But the moment was shattered, his presence only reminded her of what was at stake. As they chatted, painting butterflies in the air with laughter, she felt alive yet torn. Greg's voice echoed in the back of her mind, layering suspicion and threatening closure. A sudden question gripped her heart: could she bear to let someone see her bloom, knowing the consequences? The warmth of Jake's gaze pulled her deeper into their shared moments, yet the void of her unresolved duality poisoned the air between them. Just as the shadows of her past whispered their deceitful reminders, a single line from one of her grandmother's paintings drifted to the forefront of her thoughts: to create is to confront. Would she confront her fears and allow herself the joy she secretly craved? Or would she let Greg's oppressive darkness snuff out the flickering flame of hope she had finally found? With newfound determination, Emily knew it was time to make a decision. In that moment, the storm in her chest calmed, replaced by an overwhelming urge to show her true self: the artist, the dreamer, the woman who was no longer willing to cower. But what would the confrontation with Greg unleash? She could feel the winds shifting, and with them, the burdens of her past threatening to come crashing down like thunder. The moment of truth was brewing, and no one could predict the outcome. Emily stood in the threshold, the door still ajar, the cool breeze ruffling the edges of her resolve. Jake's presence felt like a beacon, bright and inviting, yet shadowed by her internal tempest. She gazed into his warm eyes, wanting desperately to step through the door into simplicity, yet feeling bound to the darkness lurking just behind her, tugging at her heartstrings with whispers of doubt. "Are you okay?" Jake's voice broke through her reverie, pulling her further away from the storm raging inside. His brow furrowed, concern etching itself across his features. Emily's throat tightened. He knew the mask she wore was crumbling, and she felt exposed beneath the weight of his attention. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind," she managed, forcing an easy smile. It felt like putting plaster over a crack. Jake stepped closer. "You can talk to me, you know." His sincerity wrapped her in a cocoon of warmth. "Talk about what?" She hesitated, the words lodged in her throat like stones. The memories of Greg pounded against the walls of her mind. "About whatever it is that's bothering you. You don't have to pretend with me." His unwavering gaze stirred buried emotions, the unresolved conflict she carried becoming painfully palpable. It was easier to paint the world in vibrant colors on her canvas than to let someone else into those shaded corners of her mind. Taking a deep breath, she decided to dare. There's someone from my past who keeps weighing me down. Each word was an act of rebellion against her silence, her walls slowly eroding. Do you want to talk about him? Jake asked carefully. No. Not yet. The words slipped out in a whisper, but the firmness of her voice sent a jolt through her. She wasn't ready to allow Greg into this newfound light, but it felt liberating to voice her fears. Okay, Jake replied, his tone softening. But you know you're not alone, right? Silence settled as they exchanged glances, and Emily felt an undeniable pull and urge to move beyond the confines of her past while cautiously threading hope into the fabric of her present. Just as the warm air coiled around them, the sensation of cold dread seeped back in like fog rolling over hills. But I can't let anyone in, Jake. Not yet. Understanding flickered in his eyes, yet Emily sensed a lingering sadness. She deeply wished to tell him about her art, about the triumphant emergence of her spirit through paint, but vulnerability was a monster she had yet to tame. You're more than what you've been through, Emily. You're strong, I can see it, he reassured her, and in that moment, a chink opened in her armor. Thank you, she breathed, a rush of warmth blooming in her chest at that instant. The fear she had felt earlier began to morph into an exhilarating new perspective. Freedom from the chains of her past was possible, but it would take more than just acknowledgement. She would need to confront it. With every laugh and smile Jake shared, the shadows faded just a bit more. Speaking of strength, did I ever tell you about my crazy idea for an art show? Emily asked, shifting the conversation. An art show? Now that sounds intriguing. I'd love to hear more. Jake's enthusiasm was palpable, encouraging her to dive deeper into the waters of her creativity. She found herself reveling in the idea of sharing her passion, giving life to the abstract concepts swirling in her head. They spoke for hours, weaving dreams and ambitions until the darkness that had once gripped her heart melted away, if only temporarily. Yet, as night fell and Jake prepared to leave, the weight of her unaddressed encounter with Greg returned. Feeling exposed and hopeful, she ached for this burgeoning connection, but also harbored a lingering fear that threatened to breach her newfound calm. Emily, he said softly at the door. Whatever's weighing you down doesn't have to define you. I believe in who you are becoming. She smiled in response, but inside, confidence wrestled with doubt. Would Jake still see her when the thunder rolled back in? Was she prepared to confront Greg and stand firm in her identity as an artist and an individual? As she closed the door after Jake left, a thought surged forward. What if the price of vulnerability was worth the struggle against her past? It was time to find out. The decision was made. It was time to face Greg, to confront her fears head-on. Emily's heart pounded, anticipation mingling with dread. Would she truly unleash the depth of her artistry, or would Greg's darkness drown the spark she had finally uncovered? The moment of confrontation loomed just ahead, and as the storm clouds gathered once more, she resolved to stand tall, ready to defend the tumultuous beauty of her own unfolding story. Emily took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of dread and determination churn within her as she walked to her studio. It felt like a sanctuary, a place where her creativity could run wild, yet it also housed the shadows of her past. The smell of turpentine was a reminder of the vibrant colors she had wielded to fight back against the darkness. As she stepped inside, the familiar chaos greeted her. Canvases leaned against the walls, some half-finished, others splattered with remnants of her emotional battles. This place was her heart laid bare on the canvas, yet too many echoes lingered, echoes of Greg's voice, filled with derision and disdain. With a renewed sense of purpose, she approached her largest canvas, a sprawling rectangle that had been taunting her for weeks. The colors of her dreams merged in her mind, a vivid palette waiting to be unleashed. But could she truly move forward without confronting Greg? Paint could mask her agony, but could it transform her fears into strength? She squeezed her eyes shut, envisioning the moment she would face Greg. What would she say? How would she stand her ground? Intimidation buzzed around the edges of her consciousness like an insistent insect. But dwelling in that fear wouldn't reshape who she was becoming. Instead of sinking under doubt, Emily grabbed her brush. The first stroke felt like emancipation, the rich blue of the ocean transcending the gloomy memories of her past relationship. Each stroke began to feel like a declaration of independence. She painted waves crashing against a shore, vibrant crashing tides packed with emotion and turmoil. As her brush glided across the canvas, Emily's mind began to map out her confrontation with Greg. She had let this man's toxicity infiltrate her life for so long, now it was time to reclaim her agency. Would she be the calm surface that belies the churning chaos underneath, or would she allow the waves to crash in front of her, ultimately shaping her fate? Days turned into nights in her studio, and the artwork before her transformed into the story of her struggle, a narrative crafted from pain but bathed in determination. It felt as if the very essence of her being was pouring out onto the canvas. From the depths of despair, figures of light began to emerge. She was finally painting her own narrative, one she could be proud of. However, each day brought fresh threads of anxiety woven into her resolve. Jake had become a tether to the light she was so desperately reaching for. He had seen the glimmer of potential hiding behind her fear. Could she burden him with the weights of her past? Each time his name flitted across her mind, it brought a fresh wave of warmth alongside troubling questions. Emily hesitated, brush hovering above her canvas. What if Greg sought revenge for her newfound strength? The thought threatened to fracture her courage, but she reminded herself that she was not the same person she had been. She was becoming an artist not just through her paint, but through her spirit. The moment of confrontation was drawing nearer, and with it came opportunities for growth she had yet to fully comprehend. Would she lean into Jake's support and embrace this budding connection? Could she combine the vulnerability of her artistry with her relationship, allowing both to prosper together? As she stepped back, admiring the chaos of raw emotion captured in front of her, she realized the path ahead would not be without its thorns. She would need to broach the subject of Greg with Jake, opening up about her past to allow him further into her heart. Her heart raced as anticipation swirled within her. This was not just a canvas she was filling, it was her life, budding with promise but fraught with inherent risks. It was time to take one more step toward healing. The next brushstroke she needed could very well be a conversation with Jake that would lay her past to rest. The question loomed, could she free herself from Greg without losing the woman she was becoming in the process? As she wiped her paint-splattered hands on her apron, she could almost hear the rhythmic echo of the ocean, urging her forward. One confrontation awaited, and as she prepared to navigate the storm, she sensed that hope and fear could, at last, be allies in her quest for renewal. Emily stood in front of the mirror, the light filtering through her studio's window illuminating her anxious features. Today was not just another day in the studio, it was a pivot moment, a chance to strip away the layers that had kept her bound in fear. The prospect of reaching out to Jake felt both liberating and terrifying. Had she made a mistake by not confronting Greg sooner? The barrage of questions consumed her thoughts like dark clouds threatening a summer sky. Pulling herself together, she decided to dress with purpose. The soft brush of fabric against her skin felt grounding. Each piece of clothing she selected whispered a reminder of who she was becoming, a woman who defied her past. Finally, she settled on a pale blue sundress that resonated with the very hues of her canvas. It mirrored the calming waves she had painted, serving as armor against her insecurities. As she arrived at the cafe where she arranged to meet Jake, her heart raced in her chest. The flowers brightened the patio, seeming to mock her tumultuous emotions. She spotted him sitting at their usual table, a faint smile lighting up his features when he saw her, and her anxiety momentarily melted in the warmth of his gaze. The way he looked at her made her feel seen, appreciated, and alive. "Hey, you," he said, standing to pull out her chair. "Hey," she replied, her voice slightly shaky as she settled into her seat. His smile lingered, wrapping her in a cocoon of sincerity. But the familiar urge to close her heart off lingered in the periphery. Could she truly share her deepest fears without shattering this connection? Jake leaned forward, concern painting his expression as he settled back into his seat. "You look beautiful. Everything all right?" She hesitated, the weight of her past pressing against her chest. It felt like stepping onto a tightrope, balancing sets of emotions. "I want to talk about my past. About Greg." He nodded, attentive yet cautious. "I'm here for you, Em." The soft support in his voice strengthened her resolve. She took a deep breath, letting the words spill like paint upon a canvas. messy but cathartic. He never believed in me. He always found a way to bring me down, to tell me I'd never be enough. She saw his expression shift, a mixture of anger and compassion dancing across his face. Emily continued, feeling the clarity of her voice rise with each word. I've painted through the pain, but I understand now that it's more than just creating art. I need to reclaim my voice not only on the canvas but in my life. I can't let him define who I am. Not anymore. Jake's eyes softened, filled with something she couldn't quite name. You're stronger than you realize. Facing him is just as important as making your art. Emily let his words settle within her. She had shared her vulnerability, shed layers of apprehension, but it still felt like she was on the cusp of something greater, a transformation. Their conversation flowed like paint mixing on the palette, every nuance blending to create a fresh perspective, but doubt crept back in. What if Greg came to retaliate? What if Jake couldn't handle the heat of her unresolved anger? The images of a confrontation unfolded in her mind, questioning whether every beam of hope she had was merely a mirage. Emily, Jake interrupted her spiral of thoughts, his tone more serious. I want you to know that I care about you. Whatever you're facing, we're in it together. But you need to take those next steps for yourself too. The sincerity in his voice wrapped around her, igniting a spark of determination. She pictured the ocean waves rising and crashing, representing her burgeoning strength. Would she let the crashing tides of her past continue to drown her or learn to ride them into calmer waters? I'll confront him, she whispered, as much to herself as to Jake. I'll face Greg, but I need you beside me. Jake reached across the table, his hands solid and reassuring over hers. I'll be there. You're not alone in this. A wave of gratitude washed over her as she squeezed his hand tightly, grounding herself in this moment of connection. She could feel the tide shifting within her, carrying away remnants of uncertainty, yet, despite the growing light in their conversation, another ripple of anxiety thrummed in her core. Was confronting Greg truly the right decision? As they spoke of plans and next steps, Emily's mind slipped back to the darkness, leaving her to wonder not if she could be free from Greg, but rather what would happen when she did. The horizon of a new chapter glimmered before her, but the shadows of her past lingered. She felt that soon, she would not just be confronting Greg, but the very essence of everything he represented. Everything she feared about herself, that and the whirlwind of confidence and fear, she realized the stakes were higher than she ever anticipated. The moment of truth approached. Would she emerge stronger, or would the waves of her history pull her under once more? Morning light crept timidly into Emily's studio as she began to prepare for the day. It was time to confront the specter of Greg, not just a man, but the embodiment of her self-doubt and fears. With every brushstroke and every canvas, she battled shadows of her past. But today, she would transform frustration into fortitude. After the conversation with Jake, she understood that to navigate this anxiety, she needed a structured plan. She gathered her supplies, setting the studio up as a war room. Brushes lay in one corner, paints in orderly rows, and blank canvases beckoned like silent promises. Today was not about creating art but about crafting her strategy for confrontation. A sketchbook lay at the center of her table, and she picked it up, flipping through the pages of half-finished thoughts and dreams. One page stood out, an intricate illustration of a woman standing before crashing waves. The ocean was turbulent, but the woman stood rooted, facing the chaotic water with defiance. She could relate deeply to that image, a reflection of her own turmoil. As she sketched an outline of Greg's face, her hand trembled, a manifestation of her trepidation. What would she say? How would she express the years of hurt without losing the narrative of her own transformation? The movement of her pencil felt primal, and for a moment, she let her fears coalesce into brushstrokes. Fuming with anger and vulnerability, she paused, staring at the sketch, and found an unexpected clarity in the chaos. Just like her art, the confrontation required balance. It was a mix of boldness and restraint. She drew a deep breath, centering herself in that moment. Every line she made was a commitment to not just face Greg, but to reclaim her story on her own terms. Halfway through her sketch, a memory resurfaced, her first art show, buzzing with excitement and fear. The way she felt taking that leap transformed herself from merely a creator to an artist. It wasn't just showcasing talent, it was stepping into the light, sharing her heart. If she could do that then, she could face Greg now, feeling empowered. She reached for her phone, her trembling fingers ready to seize momentum. She sent a message to Jake. "Can we meet again? I need to talk about what I'm planning." She waited, heart racing, as the silence filled the space around her. Minutes later, her phone buzzed with his response. "Of course, I'm here for you." Where and when? She arranged to meet him later, and with every word typed, she let go of some anxious weight. Having Jake's support was crucial, but she realized the real transition lay within herself. This was not just about confronting Greg, it was about defining her own self-worth outside of his influence. The sun was lowering, casting a golden hue through her studio windows. She stood to look out, allowing the peaceful glow to wash over her like a balm, displacing the tension that had clung to her for so long. She could feel the growing strength within that she had previously masked under years of silence, yet, beneath this newfound resolve festered a nagging thought. What if confronting Greg unleashed more chaos than expected? What if he retaliated? She shook her head, banishing those doubts. This was a chance to rewrite her narrative. As she interlaced her fingers and focused on her breath, a strange thrill rooted itself within her. The moment of truth neared. It felt like standing on the precipice of a wave ready to crash. Moments later, as she made her final notes on a new canvas, a thought echoed into the silence. This wasn't just a request for confrontation, it was a test of newfound strength and a declaration of her independence. But just as she finished her notes, a distant knock echoed through her studio. Curiosity mingled with anxiety as she paused, minds racing. What if it were Greg? Gazing at the door, she felt a surge of resolve course through her veins. She was ready, but was the world outside ready for the woman she had finally begun to understand? Emily walked to the door, each step heavy with anticipation and a hint of fear. The knock sounded again, more insistent this time, reverberating through the studio like a pulse. She hesitated, thoughts swirling in her mind. Was it Greg, come to disrupt her hard-won peace? Or was it someone more promising, like Jake, come to bolster her courage? Taking a deep breath, she opened the door. Standing there was an unfamiliar face, a tall man with warm eyes and an inviting smile. His presence was unexpectedly grounding amidst her brewing turmoil. She instinctively stepped back, allowing him entry, the heavy air of the day swirling into the studio with him. "Hi, I'm Alex," he said, his voice smooth yet tinged with curiosity. "I live next door. I noticed you've been painting up a storm and thought I'd stop by to introduce myself." Emily blinked, momentarily disarmed by his sincerity. "Oh, hi. I'm Emily." She offered a hesitant smile, then quickly drove herself inward, remembering that she had no room for distractions. This was not about meeting new people, it was about facing the ghosts of her past. "Your studio, it's amazing," Alex continued, glancing at her canvases. "These pieces are captivating. There's such a depth to them." His compliment nestled somewhere deep in her chest, stirring a warmth she hadn't felt in ages. But just as quickly, the weight of her upcoming confrontation pulled her down again. She shook her head gently. "Thank you, but I'm afraid they don't hold a candle to what they could be." "Why not?" he pressed, genuine interest written across his brow. "Art is about the process, not just the outcome. It looks like you're pouring your heart into it." Emily couldn't help but laugh, tinged with embarrassment. "That's easy to say. It's different when you're trying to express something that feels buried." "Ah," Alex mused, watching her intently. "Is it fear then? Or perhaps a need for validation?" The simplicity of his question caught her off guard. Did he see her struggle more clearly than she realized? She hesitated, recalling the weight of Greg's dismissive words bouncing between her ears like an echo. "I guess it's both," she finally admitted, her resolve cracking slightly. "It's about confronting my past, standing tall against someone who made me feel small." "Maybe what you need isn't to confront but to express," Alex suggested gently. "Let the canvas carry your burdens for you. Transfer that pain into color and form." Maybe your confrontation is more about transformation than conflict. His words struck a chord, reverberating through her like the ripple of a stone cast into still water. She nodded slowly, her mind racing with possibilities. Perhaps this encounter was serendipitous, a reminder that her journey didn't have to be solitary or fraught with battle. It could also encompass growth, encouragement, and unexpected connections. "Do you paint?" she asked, intrigued. "A bit," he replied, a sheepish grin playing on his lips. "But I'm more into photography. It allows me to capture stories without imposing my presence too much." Emily felt a tug at her heart, a flutter of interest that was both refreshing and terrifying. Her instinct screamed to shield herself. Vulnerability had brought her pain before. Yet, she felt a stirring within her, a beckoning towards something that could offer not just healing but a new perspective. Just then, her phone buzzed, jolting her back to reality. It was a message from Jake, confirming their meeting. The moment of truth loomed ahead like a shadow waiting to engulf her entirely. With a sense of urgency, she excused herself, fingers trembling over her phone. As she read the contents of Jake's text, anticipation and anxiety twisted inside her. Each word slipped through her mind like oil and water, refusing to settle. Would she be ready to not only confront Greg but also embrace the unexpected possibilities of her new reality? Maybe the next phase of her journey included not just conflict, but the promise of connection as well. And as if cementing that thought, Alex's voice broke through the haze. "Don't forget, Emily, your story is yours to tell, not just his." Clenching the phone tight, she nodded, feeling a thrill ripple through her. "Thanks, Alex. Your words are inspiring." But with a hint of uncertainty, she turned to the door, the upcoming discussion with Jake nagging in the back of her mind as she prepared to face Greg. Yet, she didn't feel alone anymore. The colors of her life were beginning to blend again, and she was ready to change the canvas of her heart. As she opened the door to the world beyond, a thought nagged at her. What if her journey toward understanding herself had only just begun? The door creaked as Emily stepped into the cool evening air, a stark contrast to the warmth of her studio. The weight of her decision to confront Greg loomed heavier than the humid summer evening. She couldn't deny that the previous moments spent talking to Alex stirred something in her, a flicker of hope she hadn't anticipated. Emily walked briskly towards the coffee shop where she was to meet Jake, her mind racing. What if this conversation didn't go as planned? What if she found herself sinking back into the swampy mire of Greg's influence? The tightening in her chest at the thought drove her to push forward, but lingering steps from Alex's encouragement followed her like a shadow. Approaching the cafe, she took a moment to examine her reflection in the window. Her hair was hastily tied back, accompanied by the paint-splattered apron she still wore. She examined her face, searching for signs of strength. What had she become? Or rather, who did she wish to become? The layers of her identity felt like a canvas, already painted with past emotions, some dark, some vibrant, but all undeniably formed by her choices. She entered the cafe, its warm glow enveloping her, and immediately spotted Jake seated at a table in the back. He was scrolling through his phone, a casual confidence radiating from him. As she walked over, she grappled with her own feelings of inadequacy that arose from being in his presence. Jake was composed and assured. He was everything she often felt she wasn't. "Hey, you made it." Jake greeted her with a smile that faded as he interpreted the tension etched on her features. "Everything okay?" Taking a steadying breath, she slipped into the chair opposite him. "I'm here. We need to talk." His gaze sharpened, concern flickering in his features. "What is going on?" The urgency coursing through her propelled her forward. "I need your help. I'm about to confront Greg again, and I need to be strong. Stronger than I've been without you." Jake furrowed his brow, encouraging her to continue. The piercing stare forced her to confront her desires and her fears, the implicit truth she hadn't realized was forming. She didn't just need strength, she needed support, a dependable anchor amidst the chaos. "Why let him dictate your narrative?" Jake ventured carefully. "He doesn't get to define who you are." Emily's heart flickered at his words. The shadows of doubt danced in her mind, but there was a burgeoning realization that she could reshape her narrative. I don't want to be defined by him anymore, she confessed, surprising herself with her conviction. Stirrings of defiance surged inside her, a spark ignited from Alex's provocation. I'm ready to put my story on canvas, and him in the background where he belongs. A sense of relief washed over her, though anxiety still gnawed at her insides. This was about more than the confrontation with Greg, it was a test of her growth. Emily was gathering her fragments, reshaping the idea of herself as more than just a victim of someone else's judgments. As she spoke with Jake, the cafe around her began to blur, the sounds dampening until she found clarity in her own voice. Each word she uttered was imbued with a new power, reflecting her internal determination. This was shaping who she was beyond the paint and canvas, but why did the thought of Alex linger, humming softly beneath her resolve? Was it simply the acknowledgement of her artistry, or was there something more? As she wrestled with these emerging feelings, she suddenly caught herself. Was she really ready to explore this new thread woven into the complex fabric of her life? Their conversation danced between the past and future, ultimately drawing Emily to a critical root. In daring to confront Greg, she was finally choosing to confront herself. She realized that embracing the unknown, putting herself out there and expressing both pain and joy was integral to her journey. With a final deep breath, she steeled herself. After this, I want to focus on my art. I want to pursue it seriously. It's time to let my voice shine, not just my past. Jake leaned forward, pride evident on his face. That's the Emily I know. You're ready to take on the world. The resolve settled in her heart, but just before she relished this new sense of purpose, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Alex flashed across the screen. Let me know how it goes. Remember, your story is just beginning. A pause gripped her. What kind of life awaited if she chose to embrace her journey wholeheartedly? Did it involve intertwining her burgeoning confidence with someone like Alex? The intrigue of this new connection tugged at her, demanding exploration. Emily's pulse quickened as she faced a crossroads, one that could define the trajectory of not just her confrontation with Greg, but the tapestry of her life to come. The moment had come. Would she seize it, or would she allow herself once more to be held back by fear? What was on the horizon, and how would it shift the course of her newfound resolve? The night ahead promised more than just confrontation, it could herald a vibrant rebirth from the shadows. The coffee shop buzzed as the warm, comforting scent of roasted beans enveloped her, but Emily felt a tempest brewing within. Jake's words still echoed in her mind, surging with optimism that almost felt foreign. She was ready to break free, to elevate her identity beyond the shadows of Greg. Yet with each tick of the clock, uncertainty mingled with fury, a reminder that this confrontation would call for every ounce of her newly forming strength. Are you sure this is what you want? Jake asked, breaking into her thoughts again. His voice was steady, a lifeline against the tide of her doubts. Emily dug her fingers into her palms, grounding herself. Yes. I can't live like this anymore. I refuse to allow his opinions to define me any longer. Jake glanced around, checking for eavesdroppers, then leaned in closer. Then I'll stand by you through it all. Just remember, emotional scars don't disappear overnight. The reality of Jake's words hit her hard. The journey ahead wouldn't be a quick fix. Confronting Greg meant facing her own fears, her own scars. I know, she replied, her voice low but steady. But I have to start somewhere. The conversation shifted, enveloping her in the comfort of camaraderie. Yet, as they chatted, a flicker of curiosity about Alex buzzed in the back of her mind. He had stirred something dormant within her, awakening both her creativity and vulnerability. I hope everything goes well, Jake said, breaking her reverie. But don't forget to focus on yourself afterward. Use all of this. After a few more minutes, the conversation wound down, and Emily felt a swell of determination settle over her like a cloak of warmth. You know what? I want to commit to my art. I'm ready to close the door on the past. Perfect. When this is all behind you, let us schedule studio time, Jake said, that spark of excitement lighting his eyes. Emily nodded but felt a pang of anxiety as she glanced outside. The sky was gloomy, the storm clouds looming over the horizon, a reflection of her inner storm. The time was drawing near. Soon, she would confront the man whose ghost still haunted her creatively. As she stepped back out into the cooling evening, her anxiety morphed into determination. Each step towards Greg felt like a brush stroke on her canvas, the blending of chaos and vision. The air was thick with the promise of rain, and with it came her conviction. She would own this moment, reclaim the narrative woven into her existence that Greg had sought to unravel. Her phone buzzed again, another message, heartbeat ticking in her pocket. This time, it was from Alex. Thinking about you. Good luck. Remember, you're stronger than you know. Reassured, she couldn't help but smile at his unexpected support. She organized her thoughts as she walked. What had she ever been afraid of? The confrontation wasn't just about Greg, it was about Emily finding her voice, her power. Paint wouldn't be the only medium through which she expressed herself. She would articulate her entire being here and now. As Emily arrived at Greg's building, she took a moment to breathe deeply. Memories flooded back, a tangled past filled with confusion, hurt, but also sporadic flashes of joy that felt hollow. Yet this was different, she was different. Today, she no longer only saw herself standing in the background of her life, with resolve sharpening in her chest. She pushed through the door, each footfall resonating with the strength she was channeling. No longer would she be the muted artist lost among her own colors. The confrontation ahead was merely one channel of expression for a woman newly committed to being vibrant and unapologetic, but as she approached the apartment door, doubt crept in like an unwanted shadow. The thought of Greg's derision replayed in her mind. Would he, in his toxic nature, attempt to undermine her transformation? With a steadying breath, she lifted her hand to knock, the pulse of her heart echoing through her body. The door swung open, revealing Greg's familiar silhouette, but this time, she was ready. Emily, he started, a smirk playing on his lips, but she cut him off before he could further manipulate her. I am not here to rehash our past. I need to tell you. What would follow? Would it strengthen her or hurl her back to the shadows? Only the encounter would reveal the true measure of her growth, and just as she prepared to unleash her truth, the unexpected chimed in her mind. Was she ready to hear what she truly needed to say, or would fear grip her at the moment when she needed to be free? Emily's heart raced as she stood just outside Greg's apartment, every fiber of her being trembling with a mixture of anxiety and resolve. This was the moment she had prepared for, the defining confrontation that would unravel the chains binding her to her past. With one final, steadying breath, she knocked firmly on the door. When it swung open, Greg's familiar form filled the frame. His expression faltered for just a moment at the sight of her, surprise flickering across his features before reverting to a smug smile, a veneer for the control he always tried to wield. Emily, how nice of you to drop by, he greeted, his tone condescending. Let me cut to the chase, she stated, her voice steady, carrying a newfound strength. I'm not here to rekindle anything. I've come to tell you that I'm done letting you dictate who I am. His eyebrows shot up in disbelief. What do you mean? You've always been exactly, she interjected, sucking air into her lungs, drawing upon every moment she had grown through. I've let your words shape my identity for too long. You told me I'd never be more than a nurse, that I could never venture into my art. But I've realized that I am so much more. I've begun to reclaim my life, my voice, and my dreams. His laughter cracked across the space, mocking and sharp. Dreams? You think you can just walk away from who you are? You need me, Emily. You always have. No. That's where you're wrong, she asserted with unwavering clarity. You made me feel small, but I'm not small. I've been painting again. I'm pursuing art, and I won't let you or anyone stop me. For the first time in a long while, she saw uncertainty flicker in Greg's eyes, a crack in his facade. Her confidence unfurled inside her, growing as she spoke. I'm tired of living in your shadow. It's time I took control of my narrative. Today, I refuse to be a victim of your words. Greg scoffed, but she could see the bravado cracking like paint peeling from an old wall. You think you can just make me disappear? I'm not trying to erase you, she replied, her tone calm but resolute. You will always be part of my story, but I'm taking a different direction now. You don't have the power you once had over me. He opened his mouth, clearly stung, poised to strike with another jab. But Emily didn't waver. She continued, her voice ringing with truth. I confronted my fears, Greg. You were a chapter in my life, but now I'm writing a new one and it's entirely for me. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of what was unspoken. For a brief moment, Emily could see a flicker of vulnerability in Greg, the man who had always cloaked himself in bravado. She took a breath, knowing that her victory didn't come from his approval. This was about her reclaiming herself and stepping into the spaces he had always tried to shield her from. With her heart thudding in her chest, she turned to leave, feeling lighter than she had in years. The encounter had been a confrontation not only with Greg but with a part of herself that she had buried too deep. She was leaving behind toxicity, and in its place was a blooming sense of self-worth and accomplishment. The door clicked shut behind her, and she felt the weight of apprehension lifting as she walked down the hall. Each step resonated with the rhythm of her heart, steadier, stronger, echoing the journey she had undertaken. She glanced at her phone, the messages from Jake and Alex swirling through her mind, grounding her to the present. Jake's face flashed in her mind as she headed to her studio. The warmth of what they had built together felt invigorating, a deep human connection blooming side by side with her artistry. Emily already envisioned her next steps, creating pieces inspired not just by her struggles but by the potential that lay before her. It was time to channel her energy into something beautiful and bold. As she stepped into her studio, the familiar mix of paint and possibility enveloped her like an embrace. Her canvases greeted her like old friends, waiting for the vibrancy she was ready to unleash. With renewed vigor, she picked up her brushes, each one a tool of empowerment. This was her moment of rebirth, an artist rebirth through struggles but standing with new confidence. She began to paint, not just as a way to escape, but as a means to express her joy, pain, hopes, and dreams. In those swirling colors and bold strokes, she saw her truth emerge vividly. Each canvas was a step forward, no longer tethered to an old identity marked by doubt and restraint. She was no longer simply Emily the nurse who had fought to reclaim her art. She was Emily the artist, the dreamer, ready to embrace everything the world had to offer. And as the days passed, the whispers of doubt that had once plagued her faded to a distant memory. Instead, with every creation, she proved to herself the power of resilience and the beauty of her transformation. As she stood back to admire her latest work, a collision of emotions on canvas, she could see the journey she had undertaken, one filled with vivid colors and intricate designs, mirroring the complexity of her life. She was not just surviving, she was finally thriving. It was a future she had courageously shaped with her own hands, and in the heart of every stroke, she felt a simple truth: she was worthy of love, from herself and others. She had stepped fully into her life, a vibrant artist creating not for validation, but for genuine fulfillment. Now, she was ready to share her work with the world, ready to inspire others to confront their own shadows and shift the boundaries of their narratives. Life was waiting, and she was ready to embrace it with open arms. And you, watching this transformative journey unfold, now have a chance to embrace your own path of overcoming. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss more exclusive emotional stories that inspire change. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, showing your support for these powerful narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about Emily's transformation. Your insights matter. And finally, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support for personal overcoming stories and the journeys of transformation.